Have you discovered Placerville, but now you're wondering if maybe you want a little bit more of a suburban community to live in? Or maybe you're worried about commute times down to Sacramento and you're thinking you ought to be down the hill a little bit further? So you discovered Cameron Park, and now you don't know what's the difference between these two places or which one would fit your family best? Well, in this video, I'm gonna help you answer that question. When it comes to trying to nail down the right community for you and your family, when you hop on a first call with me, I'm gonna run you through a bunch of qualifying questions, like how far a drive do you wanna be from the kids' school, a hospital, a grocery store, or the highway? Do you wanna be above or below snow line? Be around oak trees or pine trees, beetles or rolling stones, window or aisle, all the important stuff. But when it comes to evaluating these communities, especially when they're so close and so similar, like Cameron Park and Placerville, you're gonna have to do a bit of a deeper dive to determine which one's gonna be right for your family. And today's video is that deeper dive. I'm gonna run you through 8 critical criteria so you can decide which community is right for your family, Cameron Park or Placerville. So let's get stuck right into it. If you've been watching a while, welcome back. And if you're new here, you're probably wondering who I am and why you should listen to me. And it's a fair question. My name is Rich Curtis and I'm with eXp Realty, and I've been selling homes here in El Dorado County for nearly 20 years in markets ranging from the Great Recession all the way to the COVID market insanity and everything in between. So when it comes to El Dorado County real estate, I've got you covered. Right off the bat, you might be wondering, where exactly are these two communities? So Cameron Park and Placerville are really close together. They're about a 15-minute drive apart. Both of them are located on the western slopes of the Sierras on Highway 50, about halfway between Sacramento and Tahoe. If you're in Placerville, you're about an hour to Tahoe and about an hour to Sacramento. And if you're in Cameron Park, you're about an hour and 15 to Tahoe and about 45 to Sacramento. So they are in an ideal location to experience everything that's great about the western slope of the Sierras, and also in an ideal location to commute down to Sacramento for work. Although Cameron Park is going to be a little bit better for the commuters in the group. So the first criteria when evaluating any community is the general vibe. What does it feel like to live there? What's unique about these two communities? And like I said, they're pretty close together. They're just 15 minutes apart, and they are both rural communities, but they do have a really distinct feel. So Placerville has a much more rural feel than Cameron Park. Placerville has about 11,000 people, but they're pretty spread out. We do have a downtown area, and it's a little sort of quaint old gold rush style downtown with little mom and pop shops. It's in fact been voted one of the best downtowns in America several times over. Now Cameron Park is a little bit more suburban living. The houses are a little bit close together, but nothing like they'd be down in, say, El Dorado Hills or Folsom or Sacramento. Most of Cameron Park are on 1/3 of an acre lots. Most of Placerville is on anything from 1/4 acre all the way up to 10 acres, so it's a lot more varied. But most of Cameron Park is suburban neighborhoods on about 1/3 of an acre. And most of the shopping in Cameron Park is more of your traditional strip mall style big store shopping. So they have a very different vibe. Cameron Park will feel a lot like the neighborhood you're coming from if you live someplace, say, like in the South Bay area or down in some places in LA if you're outside of the city center. Placerville definitely feels like small town America. It is a small, little, cool mountain town. And Cameron Park feels much like a small family commuter town. It is a bedroom community essentially for Sacramento because it is at 15 minutes closer and shaves that commute down to 30 to 45 minutes depending on where you need to work in Sacramento. It is really an ideal bedroom community for Sacramento. So that gives you a little bit of a flavor of what each place feels like. Criteria number 2 in evaluating these two communities is home prices. And even though these two communities are very similar and pretty close together, like I said, just a 15-minute drive apart, there's a significant difference in home price. The median home price in Placerville is $509,000 as of the recording of this video. The median home price in Cameron Park is $679,000 as of the recording of this video. So $170,000 higher median home price down in Cameron Park. Now there's a few reasons for this, one of which is that Cameron Park was built out newer than Placerville, so there are newer neighborhoods and newer homes, and they tend to have built larger homes when they built the newer homes, so they tend to be more expensive. It's also closer to Sacramento, which is closer to a place with larger job diversity. Like I said, it's a great bedroom community or commute location for Sacramento, and as such, it attracts more people and has a higher home price. So if you're evaluating the two communities, then if you're on a tighter budget, Placerville might be right for you. And if you have a little bit bigger budget, you can easily decide between the two. But what do you get for that median home price? Well, in Placerville, for your $509,000, you're gonna get about a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,700 square foot, anywhere from a ½ acre to an acre of land that it's sitting on, in pretty good shape, but it'll need some updating. Now in Cameron Park, for your $679,000, you're gonna get more of a 4-bedroom, 2.5 to 3-bathroom, 2,100 square foot home sitting on about a third of an acre. For the most part, all of Cameron Park, for whatever reason, the way they built it out, is sitting on a third of an acre. Most of the houses are on a third of an acre. Now, adjacent to Cameron Park, there is another community called Shingle Springs. And to people from out of town, the two are essentially indistinguishable. And even frankly, to people who live here, they often call it either one. But there is a distinct difference. Shingle Springs, the lots are bigger. Most of them are on acreage, 1 acre or more, and the home prices tend to be higher because of that acreage. They tend to be larger custom homes on that acreage. So we'll do an entire different video on Shingle Springs, but for Cameron Park, you're looking at that 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,100 square foot house on a third of an acre for your $679,000. Criteria number 3 when evaluating these two communities is lifestyle. And I think the lifestyle is actually quite a bit different in the two places. And that's a little bit because of that bedroom community commute location feel to Cameron Park. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some great things to do in Cameron Park. Some great parks, including my family's favorite Rasmussen Park with a pond and mountain bike trails and a playground for the kids and sports fields. It's awesome. And you have the Cameron Park Lake for fishing and hiking around, and there's a playground there too. There's some really great stuff in Cameron Park, but it does have more of that feel of we live here and we go and we play somewhere else. So we live here and we might work down the hill in Sacramento, and we live here and we might play up in Placerville or even further east to Tahoe. Versus Placerville is higher up the hill and more in the wilderness zone of Dorado County. About 75% of our county is open space and protected wilderness, and Placerville is getting deeper into that zone. So from Placerville, you have closer access to the more wilderness style recreation. And as such, Placerville feels a little bit more like a town that you live in and play in. Now, work-wise, a lot of people in Placerville still commute, so that's going to be very similar in the two communities, but Placerville definitely feels like a place that you live and play in, and Cameron Park a little bit more like a place that you live in, but you work and play in other places. The other difference in lifestyle is that Cameron Park, if you have a family, tends to have real neighborhoods with streets and cul-de-sacs where the kids can actually walk down the street and knock on a door and play with another kid like we did when we were little, or hop on a bike and do the same thing. Placerville has a little bit of that, but for the most part, the houses are much more far-flung, and if you're going to be getting the kids together, it's directed by the parents, and you're getting in a car, and you're going to meet at a park or meet at each other's homes. But either way, there's almost always a car involved for the kids to get to go play with someone. So that is a significant difference. If you're the type of people that really want to live in a mountain town, but you want to still have that neighborhood experience for your kids, Cameron Park is sort of the end of that as you're heading east. It's the last place you can really get that as you're heading east up the hill towards Tahoe. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't mind not being in a neighborhood and you really like to be out in the woods and the trees more often, then Placerville is going to be the place for you. So the two communities aren't too far apart, but they have a distinctly different feel, with Cameron Park being more suburban and neighborhood based and Placerville being more rural and dispersed. Hey, if by the end of this video you still aren't sure if Cameron Park or Placerville are right for you, or even Dorado County, feel free to reach out to me via the contact information on your screen or in the description down below. I've been selling homes here for nearly 20 years, and I've helped hundreds of families just like yours figure out where to land in Dorado County, and I'm always happy to help. All right, now let's get back to deciding whether Cameron Park or Placerville is right for your family. Criteria number 4 is cost of living. Now, of course, we went over the biggest line item in your budget earlier with your housing cost. But the rest of the cost of living is going to be very similar between the two communities, with slight differences just because of the temperature and weather differences. So both communities are going to be on PG&E for power, and PG&E is unfortunately relatively expensive power for the state of California. You don't really get on SMUD power until you hit Folsom. I'll have a video comparing Cameron Park to Folsom for you. You can watch that one. And I already have a video comparing Placerville to Folsom and El Dorado Hills to Folsom for you. so you can see those differences. But if you want to get to the cheaper power zone, you got to go all the way down the hill to Folsom. So they're both going to be the same cost for power in Cameron Park and Placerville. The difference is Cameron Park is lower down the hill, and it's going to run on average about 10 degrees hotter in the summer than Placerville. So in the summer, even though you're paying the same for power, you might be running your AC a little bit more, and so you might have slightly higher power bills down in Cameron Park in the winter. Now, similarly, Placerville is at 2,000 foot elevation in the winter and even sometimes gets a little bit of snow. Both communities are going to be heating using propane for the most part, unless it's an all-solar home. And so in Placerville, your propane costs might be a little bit higher in the winter because it's colder and you'll be running the heat a little more. And those two are probably about a wash, keeping the communities about level on cost of living. Now, when it comes to Placerville, you are going to have, in my opinion, a little bit more expense in gasoline for the vehicles, because you're just going to do more driving because it's that more rural, dispersed living. So it's going to be usually a further drive to a grocery store, a further drive to the doctor, a further drive to your kids' schools, a further drive for play dates, and to do anything in town, you're going to be getting in the car. Versus in Cameron Park, there's going to be shorter drives to all of those services, and you'll have some neighborhood experience where you might not have to put the kids in the car to go play with some friends. So your monthly gasoline bill is likely going to be higher up in Placerville. But the main difference, as you could see from the last section, is the housing costs. That's the big difference in the cost of living between the two. Otherwise, they're going to be relatively the same. Criteria number 5 to compare these two communities is recreation, and both communities are awesome for recreation. There's just a little difference in the amount and the style. So in Cameron Park, you have the Cameron Park Lake, which is awesome, like I said, for fishing and tennis courts and a play park for the kids. It's a really great resource, and there's a trail around it for walking and hiking and jogging and that sort of stuff. You also can pretty quickly get to Bass Lake down in El Dorado Hills, or another lake to do a little bit of fishing at. And then you have several community parks. And you also have, like I said, Rasmussen Park, which has a community park and a little wilderness component with some mountain biking and a cool pond there. But do be advised, the wilderness portion of Rasmussen Park around the pond is currently earmarked for development and building new houses. There is a local group trying to fight that development, but as of now, that part of the park will go away to homes in the near future. So don't count on that being there for you. But in general, Cameron Park, most of your recreation is going to be in kind of established parks and established community spaces. Now, Placerville, being rural and being in the forest, has a lot more wilderness experience stuff. Right here in town, we have the Rails to Trails Trail, which is a little more developed like Cameron Park, but we also have access to a lot of wilderness hiking trails. And in a short drive just down to the north into Coloma and Lotus, there's a ton of hiking. And these are unpaved, undeveloped dirt trails out into the woods and along the rivers. So if you're the kind of person that wants to very quickly from your house get to a park with the kids where you can have play structures and have a paved trail or have some sports fields to play, Cameron Park is absolutely your jam. Now, if you're the kind of person who wants to get away from people and get out on the trails and get into the woods as quickly as possible, then when it comes to recreation, Placerville is going to be your place. Mountain biking, rock climbing, paddle boarding, whitewater kayaking, whitewater rafting, all that stuff. There's going to be just more access to it in Placerville than in Cameron Park. So it just depends on the type of recreation you like to do and how quickly you like to get there. You'll be able to get to a place to play a lot quicker in Cameron Park, but it's going to be more developed. Placerville is going to take you longer, but you're going to be more in a remote location and in the woods. So you'll have to decide which one works best for your family. Criteria number 6 is fire insurance, or the cost of fire insurance, which if you already live in California, you know this is an issue for all of us. All the way from San Diego, all the way up to the Oregon border, everybody in anywhere that has a tree has high cost of fire insurance. But some places are worse than others, and Placerville is a rough place for the cost of fire insurance. You're going to budget a minimum of $3,000 a year annual premiums to have fire insurance coverage for your home in Placerville, and it can very easily be closer to $6,000 depending on the area you're in and the size of the home. If you've got a bigger home and you're in a really high fire severity zone, it can be $9,000, $10,000, or maybe even a little higher than $10,000 in the Placerville area. Now in Cameron Park, there are some areas that are more rural and more treed and more forested, and they're going to have the same problem. But there are some areas that are much more cleared and in neighborhoods where you might be able to access some cheaper fire insurance. Stuff in a more normal range in the $1,500 to $3,000 a year premium range. So when it comes to fire insurance, if the cost of fire insurance is a primary issue for you, Cameron Park's going to get the win there. Hey, if you've made it this far and you're getting anything at all out of this video, hit the like button, click subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss another video with critical information to help you with your move to El Dorado County, including the many upcoming community comparison videos I've got coming out in the next few weeks. Criteria number 7 to evaluate these two communities is schools. Now, this is a huge one for parents. We're always worried about where our kids are going to go to schools. Now, if you don't have kids and you don't intend to have kids, you can just skip on to criteria number 8 here. But for the parents, you don't have to really worry. We have great schools in both communities. In fact, if you go on greatschools.org and start poking around, you'll find that the vast majority of schools in both communities, Placerville and Cameron Park, score an 8 out of 10 or higher on greatschools.org. There's a little discrepancy when it comes to the high schools with Ponderosa High and Cameron Park, which actually it's technically in Shingle Springs, but that's where the Cameron Park kids go, getting an 8 out of 10 on greatschools.org, and our two high schools up here in Placerville, Union Mine and El Dorado, getting a 7 out of 10 on greatschools.org. But all three of those high schools are excellent, so you won't have any trouble with any of the schools that you're going to. Now, when it comes to alternative schools, most of our schools of choice or alternative schools are going to be in Cameron Park or down to El Dorado Hills. So if you're in Cameron Park, you will have a closer drive to some of those alternative school programs. You'll still have access to them for your kids from Placerville. You just have to drive a little bit further. For example, if you have your kids in the Montessori system, our one Montessori middle school in the county here is in Shingle Springs, which is closer to Cameron Park than it is to Placerville. Then we have some other schools of choice and homeschool support schools down in El Dorado Hills. When it comes to homeschooling, we have a pretty active homeschool population here and homeschool pod community, and there's several pods in Placerville and in Cameron Park, and they even mix and mingle between the two. So whichever community you live in, if you're going the homeschool route, you may find yourself driving back and forth anyway to socialize your kids with pods in the two different communities. But if you are a homeschool parent, there's a lot of support for you here in our county, whichever community you choose. So the bottom line is all the schools in both these communities are really excellent, and you're going to be fine with whichever one you choose when it comes to schools. All right, criteria number 8 to evaluate these two communities, and an important one, is employment, right? You got to work, you got to eat. And maybe you're relocating for a job, so this one's already kind of baked in for you. But if you're not, I'll give you an idea of the differences between the employment opportunities in the two communities. Now, in this one, it's going to kind of depend on what you're willing to do and how far you're willing to drive. So if you're looking to work in the community you live in, then Placerville is going to have a little bit more job opportunities for you. We have the hospital here in Placerville and all of the other surrounding sort of medical support system for the hospital. So if you're in healthcare, there's going to be a lot of jobs in Placerville for you in the healthcare sector. There's also going to be a lot of education jobs. We have more schools and more school districts up here in the Placerville area than you do down in Cameron Park, so education jobs are going to be plentiful here. We also are the county seat, and so we have the county office buildings here in Placerville, so there's a lot of county jobs available. Now, outside of education, healthcare, and county jobs, most everybody else up in Placerville is an entrepreneur of some sort, running a small business, having a service-based business, that sort of thing. Now, Cameron Park, being that it is more of a bedroom community, there's not as much there. There is a little bit of healthcare work there. We do have a few offsite surgery centers in Cameron Park. So there's healthcare work in Cameron Park, and there is a little bit of retail work in Cameron Park, but otherwise there's not much industry there. So you may find yourself coming up to Placerville for education or healthcare or county jobs, but for the most part, probably if you're in Cameron Park, you're commuting down the hill for work. And the first place where there's going to be significantly more opportunity is going to be El Dorado Hills, because we do have a little bit of tech job opportunity there. Then you hit Folsom, just a few minutes further west, and there is tech and a lot of healthcare jobs and a lot of retail jobs in Folsom. Folsom has all your big box and chain stores. So if you work in retail and you're kind of working your way up in retail, you want those upwardly mobile jobs where you can get into management, that's really going to be a Folsom sort of thing. There's not going to be as much of that available up the hill. And then of course you have Sacramento, which has not only a lot of healthcare jobs, but also the state, all of state governments there. So you have a lot of state job opportunities. So if you need a lot more job diversity or access to job diversity and you're planning to drive or commute to work, Cameron Park's going to be a better bet. You'll have a shorter commute and quicker access to get to El Dorado Hills, Folsom, and Sacramento, where there's more opportunities. If you work in healthcare, education, or you think you're going to be able to get a county job, then Placerville, and you want to live where you work, Placerville is going to have more opportunity for that. Cameron Park really is a bedroom community. Most people are commuting to work who live in Cameron Park. All right, that wraps up our comparison of Placerville versus Cameron Park, and I hope this has helped you decide which community might be a better fit for your family. But if you're still not sure, or you are sure, and now you want to do a deeper dive on each of these communities, then click this video right here on the pros and cons of living in Cameron Park. And if it's Placerville you want more information on, you can click this video right here on the pros and cons of living in Placerville. And if you're still not sure and you want to compare some of our other communities and see Placerville versus El Dorado Hills or Placerville versus Folsom, you can click this playlist right down here on the pros and cons of many of our other foothills communities. As always, thank you so much for watching and making it to the end with me, and I'll see you on the next one.